Hey everybody, it's Russ from Kilt and Cork, and tonight we are broadcasting live from my studio at home again. We haven't been back here in probably 12 weeks or so, it's kind of cool to be back in the home studio for a little bit. Tonight we've got a pretty cool night. We're going to talk about a little history of me. And the reason why this came about is just because I realized through questions and through people who are out there I talk to all the time and meet, that me being Russ Reyes is still a little bit of a mystery or an enigma, if you will. So I'm going to shed a little bit of light on me and kind of what makes me tick, why I am the way I am, which no excuses, it just is the way it is, and kind of what happened in my life to transpire to put me where I'm at right now, to be this person who is doing this Kilt and Cork thing and trying to spread the word and spread the love about this area. So it's probably not going to make sense. It's going to be a lot of incoherent gibberish mostly, but I encourage you to follow along. And if you have any questions tonight, please feel free to text it in. If you watch this show later on, and you have questions about me or my childhood or what I'm doing or anything really, feel free to just put that in the comments, and I always make sure I comment. So before we get into the history of me and give you a little background on me, I wanted to just kind of real quick give a shout out to the last two people that I had on my show. And that is Cynthia Kirk from naughtywineaccessories.com. I wanted to give you guys a heads up that the product that you saw on the show 2 weeks ago when we were at the Heart Lounge is now available for purchase. And I don't have one right now, otherwise it would be on one of these bottles, but you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know, go to naughtywineaccessories.com and find that and get it for Christmas. I also want to thank Leslie, who partnered with me yesterday. Leslie Bohm from Libations by Leslie. She helped me do the cocktail that we did yesterday. I hope you guys enjoyed that. We're going to be doing some more collaborations with Leslie coming up here for the New Year's time. So stay tuned for that. And we'll talk a little bit more about some other collaborations we're doing here at the end. But anyways, again, I'm Russ Reyes from Kilt and Cork, and we're here in my home studio where I feel most comfortable, especially when I'm talking about me. So I'm just going to get into it and kind of just start going and rattling off stuff about me. As you can see, I've got an array of beverages here, and they all have a story, and we'll kind of talk about those as I'm talking. So we're going to condense this into like 20 minutes if we can. So all about me. So first thing I wanted to tell you is I'm here in Northern California, Cameron Park, and I am married. I have 4 kids, 2 of which live at home. They're both teenagers, and it's, teenagers are teenagers. I've got 2 adult kids, a daughter and a son, and they both live in San Diego. It's very cool because they each have 2 boys. So I've got 4 grandsons. It's a family full of boys. I myself have 3 brothers, and it's, what can I say? It's just boys, except for my one daughter who's precious, and she's the standout of the group. But anyways, so I'm here in Northern California. I love where I live. I'm really passionate about it, and I'll kind of tell you why here in a little bit. But if you go all the way back to the beginning of where it all started, and I'm just going to be unfiltered here. So if I say something, don't be surprised. It's kind of unfiltered because there's some interesting stuff in my past. Anyways, I was born in McKinney, Texas. So McKinney, Texas is, I guess, just outside of Dallas. I think the only time I remember being there, I don't remember because I was born. And then about 6 months later, we moved from McKinney to California. My mom, her name, maiden name was Jean Margaret Campbell. Now, her Campbell lineage is kind of Irish, Scottish, and Spanish. So in honor of her, I'm pouring my first cocktail of the night, and that's some Glenlivet Scotch, because that's the part of her heritage and her history that most stands out to me, obviously because of her last name, Campbell. So the Campbell clan is the tartan that I wear most often when I'm not wearing the black or whatever. So that's the tartan from Scotland. Now, my mom was born in Alabama and back in the 30s. And she was a real fireball of a woman, had red hair her whole life. She always dyed her hair red. She met my dad in the late 1950s. Now, my dad is Mexican. He was born in Agua del Medio, and that is in the state of San Luis Potosí in Mexico. Now, my dad, I'm going to cheers him and a toast to my dad. And I'm going to be drinking some nice Cazul single barrel tequila because I love tequila. I love scotch. You'll see all this other stuff too. But my dad is the Mexican part of that equation that made me. And it's so good, so delicious. Nice spice on that. Anyways, he was an immigrant who came to this country illegally. And I know that's a huge topic right now, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my dad. He actually crossed the Rio Grande, swam the Rio Grande, and came to Texas, where he ended up working for a while before he became naturalized and got his green card. And he did eventually become a citizen, not a citizen, but he did have his green card eventually. But he did come to this country illegally. So, there are people that come to this country illegally. I'll just do a shout out to those people who are contributors. And he was a contributor. And I'll explain a little bit about him in a minute. But anyways, so I've kind of always embraced this Mexican heritage of mine. Obviously, because it was such a big part. I grew up in the 1960s and 70s when, largely interracial marriages were kind of frowned upon. And, we experienced a little bit of that growing up. I remember one time when I was in kindergarten, the teachers called my parents in, and my dad didn't speak very good English, and he was also illiterate, but I'll talk about that too in a minute. But they basically told him that I'm slow, that I think slow, and that I'm not going to be able to pass, and that I'm going to fail, because when they ask me questions, I sit there and I look at them and I think about my answer. Now, they attributed that to the fact that I was bilingual. I grew up speaking Spanish and English, probably more Spanish than English, because my aunt, who also came over from Mexico, was taking care of my brother and I when we were younger. And she nannied us while my mom and dad worked. So anyways, they told my mom that if I did not stop speaking Spanish, that I was going to fail and I was going to basically be a loser and I wasn't going to pass. So they stopped speaking Spanish to me at a very early age. Now, I still speak a little bit of Spanish, and I wish I could speak it more fluently, but it's one of those things where I love the culture. I love the Mexican culture. I love everything there is about Mexico, and the food and the art and the music. But I also embrace the Celtic culture as well from my mom's side of the family. And honestly, there's a lot of similarities between the symbolism and the beauty and the art, and not the music, but I do like both sides of the music. I can listen to Celtic music or mariachi music just equally great, and I love that. So anyways, back to my parents. As they were raising me, my mom was a lifetime Pacific Bell union worker. She worked for Pacific Bell and Ma Bell, but she always was a part of the union. She was a union rep. She passed up so many opportunities to be a manager because she loved fighting with managers. She loved representing the underdogs and the people who were being mistreated. And that was her life's work, is to basically represent those people to the union when there was grievances and all that kind of stuff. I learned the word grievance early on. And then my dad, like I said, he was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. And he ended up putting himself through a trade school to learn how to be a mechanic. And, his favorite drink when I was growing up was always Coors. So I've got a Coors here too, because I just remember Coors being a big part of our life growing up. And I'm sure that he drank a lot of it when he was going through trade school. But that's how I grew up, in a family of blue collar people, living in a beautiful place in San Clemente, California was my early years. So I thought everybody lived on the beach. I thought everybody could see the sunset on the Pacific as they were going to sleep at night. And boy, was I wrong as I grew up and moved around and kind of saw the rest of the world, the country. But anyways, so my mom and my dad, if we just go back a little bit, when they, I guess, had me, it was kind of a scandalous thing that happened. And I learned what the word bastard was pretty early in my life, because I was born with a mom and a dad who were not married. So there's a really cool story to that. And honestly, it's a great love story. It's also sad and tragic, but because obviously people get hurt when these things happen, but it's part of me, and it's part of kind of my history. And I can honestly tell you, there's really nothing I'm not proud of growing up and knowing who I am and being a part of this family that has been so important to me. So my mom and my dad grew up in San Clemente. All through high school, I was kind of an average student. I didn't really excel at much other than friends. I was great with people. I could have friends and lots of friends and stuff. And of course, I love to draw and art, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I was very smart, and I was in a lot of AP classes, but I just didn't want to apply myself. And so I think that I was bored a lot growing up. So that kind of catapulted me into, what do I do when I got out of high school? Well, I married my high school sweetheart, Linda, who is an amazing woman, and she's the mom of my 2 older kids. And we had a little boy named Jared, who I can't wait to see here coming up. Yep, that's me and my son when I was about ready to go off to the Air Force, because what do you do when you've got a brand new baby and you're just trying to figure out your way in life? Well, my choice was I'm just going to go ahead and join the military, and the Air Force always intrigued me. So that's kind of what I did. I joined the Air Force. So the next 6 years of my life were exciting. I got to travel the world. I got to see places like Germany, where, as you can see, I've got a German beer here because I fell in love with Germany. I mean, Germany is such a cool culture, and especially this time of year at Christmas, it's just amazing. I mean, it's like Christmas was born in Germany. I mean, Tannenbaum, Christmas tree, Tannenbaum. So anyways, I drank a lot of beer in Germany. But I also gained an appreciation for wine there as well with the German wines, because I wasn't a huge wine drinker. My mom and dad never drank wine. My mom was a strictly rum and brandy drinker, and always with Coke. And my dad, like I said, he drank that too, but he also drank beer. So he drank a lot of Coors, a lot of Pabst, that kind of stuff. Beck's is one of my favorites. There used to be some other German beers here that you can't find as easily, but I like the Beck's. So here I am in Germany. Pretty young, in my 20s, with a little family. My daughter was born there, and really, like I said, gained an appreciation for the wines that were in Germany, and got to tour a lot of vineyards and, of course, a lot of breweries in Germany, like it is back in, I should say, to West Germany, because I was there in the 80s. So there's East Germany and West Germany. The wall had not come down yet. Middle of the Cold War, really interesting time to be alive in the United States. Very even more interesting to be alive as a U.S. citizen in another country during that time. But, people made the most of it. And I can tell you, honestly, it was an amazing time of my life to live in Germany and to see a lot of Europe, traveling to England and Spain and Italy, Greece, just great experiences. And every place I went, obviously I was young and I was with my buddies, we drank. So we drank a lot of things over there that I got turned on to pretty early, like ouzo in Greece, like the real stuff that is kind of mind-bending when you drink a lot of it. But a lot of the wines in Italy and stuff. So after the Air Force, I get out, and then I find myself single again, divorced, I should say. My first divorce. So scandalous, I'm telling you. You guys are going to learn some interesting stuff about me. So that led to another marriage. Obviously, that it happens sometimes, a little rebound, whatever. But that only lasted a couple of years. And then after that, I found myself single again and kind of in a new job. And I had, my kids were in San Diego and I was seeing them pretty often. But the job I was with a company called Eddie Bauer, which was a great company. And I ended up moving a lot with them. So that led me to San Leandro, Northern California. I grew up in Southern California. I went off, explored the world, came back to San Diego, and then started working down there, and then moved up to Northern California by way of the high desert. But we'll skip that part. Nothing exciting there. So when I was living in Northern California, it's where I met my current wife, Lauren. So she was an employee of mine. I actually interviewed her, and she worked for me shortly before I had to fire her, not for her performance, but because I started dating her. So I have to tell you, it's great when you interview your wife. So tip out there, interview your wife before you marry her. Anyways, so when we were dating, we went to San Francisco a lot and Napa Valley a lot. I mean, almost twice a month. And that is really where I started learning about wines and learning about different wines. And yes, disclaimer here, Beringer White Zinfandel. that was like the training wheels wine that we started on. And, from there we moved into some other things, obviously the cabs and the shards and all that kind of stuff. But that formative time in my life, as far as the wines, is really where I started getting excited about wine. And then I moved back east. So I lived in Virginia for a while. And in Virginia, for those of you who don't know, it's a huge wine scene there. I mean, that's kind of like the birthplace of the wine movement in the United States. At the time, it was the colonies, because people like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, they brought, well, Thomas Jefferson specifically brought vines from France to America, planted them, and his vineyards are still there today. Not the same vines, obviously, but the vineyards are there. And he helped other people plant vines. Like there's a place called Barbersville. He helped the Barber family plant a huge vineyard, and that's still a working winery in Virginia. So I really embraced the wines there, as well as the whiskeys, because when I was living in that part of the world, kind of Virginia is about as far north in the South as you can go. It's still the South, though, and don't let anyone tell you differently. If you're in Virginia, you're in the South. But there's a lot of whiskeys there. So I started learning about whiskey, and I had gained an appreciation of whiskey because of Lauren's dad. He's a big Jack Daniels drinker and also a big Scotch drinker. And I just had to start drinking Scotch and whiskey when we were hanging out. So I left Northern California to Virginia with a real thirst for these different experiences of the whiskeys and the wines and stuff. So living in Virginia was amazing. That's where the original Shenandoah Valley is. So we've got our Amador Shenandoah Valley, but the Shenandoah in Virginia is absolutely just breathtaking. But there's a lot of wine regions around there. And that lasted for a little bit. Went to New Hampshire. So shout out to New England and my friends who are in New England. If you're watching, I love you guys and miss New England. It's amazing this time of year too. Started brewing beer and came back to the States. Or came back to the States. Yeah. New England is still in the States, but came back to California. As you can tell, I'm drinking Scotch, tequila, beer. I didn't open any wine tonight because I just don't want it to go to waste with all this other stuff going on. So back in California, moved back to Northern California. My dad was ill, and I got to see him a little bit before he passed away, short after we moved back to California. But we were living in close to Sacramento, and I kind of wanted to get out of the city because after living in Virginia and New Hampshire, it was like, I need to get out of the city and I need to move somewhere where it's a little bit more rural. So we moved up here to Cameron Park, which at the time was fairly rural. Now it's a little bit more grown, but the cool thing about living here is I really soon found that there's a wine movement here in Northern California. And at the time, it was pretty small in El Dorado. I mean, we had Latcham, we had Granite Springs, we had Boger. Boger was probably the first winery that we went to here in the area, and really enjoyed it and found the wines to be great, compared to what we had started drinking in the very beginning of our wine drinking career. These wines are outstanding. Then we moved into Amador and met the people at Carmer, met the people at Cooper, met the people at Vino Noceto. And that was kind of where I started really learning about our local wines. And to be honest with you, I fell in love with this place. I fell in love with the whole wine scene up here. So again, if you guys have any questions about any of this, go ahead and jump off. But we're going to be a little bit late. I'll just tell you that we started late. We'll be a little bit late with the show because this is kind of important. The first article I wrote about the wineries here was for Carmer, and it was for a magazine called Style. And at the time, they were just starting out. Terry Carroll and Wendy Sipple had just started that magazine. And I said, hey, you guys should have a wine section. They said, sure. Okay, you write it. So I did. So I wrote for them for a couple of years, and it was really cool. But that's what started me really into this whole writing about the wines, blogging about the wines, talking about the wines, and really introduced me to a lot of the people up here, which I am so glad I did, because they're great people and the families have come and gone, but there's just so many good people up here now making amazing wines, outstanding wines. And that's really where it started. So here I am all these years later, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? I'm grown up now, and I kind of want a job that I'm going to enjoy doing, kind of like this, where I can have beers and talk to you guys and stuff. So that's why I started Kilt Cork. Now, the kilt I didn't mention, that obviously goes all the way back to the Celtic part of my life. Started wearing a kilt about 12 years ago with the rest of my brothers, the Rogue Brotherhood. I'm sure you've heard me talk about them before, but we ended up getting everyone to wear them. So now we wear them whenever we're together and golfing and stuff like that. But I wear my kilt pretty much all the time when I'm out and about, especially when I'm out visiting people. And I had a question from Debbie. She asked online what it's like wearing kilt and how do people treat you? And all I can say is, if you're a guy out there and you have hangups about wearing a kilt, you got to get over it, because it's a great piece of clothing, but it's one of those things where it allows people to come up to you and talk to you and feel comfortable, because it's a natural icebreaker. So if you're a gregarious type of person, you like being out, you like talking to people, I say go out and get a kilt and wear it around, because you're going to get a lot of people coming up to talk to you, and it's a great way to talk about these kind of things. So anyways, all of that stuff in my history really contributed to my personality and my feeling of really wanting to find something I'm passionate about, because both my mom and dad were very passionate about what they did, and that's kind of how I landed in this choice I have here of doing this Kilt Cork, and it's amazing. I have to thank you guys though for following me and for liking the page and for kind of encouraging me to do this. I felt it was time now to just talk a little bit about my background and kind of how I came into all this, but I'm doing it because you are interested in this. You are invested in it, and because of that, I want to do a good job, and I want to show you these amazing things that are around here, and turn you on to some new beverages, and hopefully you guys can find some stuff that I talk about that is really interesting. Hopefully, but anyways, again, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask. We're going to be wrapping it up here pretty quick because we're just over a little bit in time. But I knew we'd be over a little bit because when I start talking about myself, there's just a lot to talk about, which I couldn't even touch on some of it, but maybe another show we'll talk about part 2 of this and how it all kind of came together. But I do want to talk a little bit about things that are coming up and not coming up. First off, our last show of this season, we're going to call this a season that we have, first season of Kilt Cork Live, is going to wrap up next week. Location is still to be announced, so pay attention and we'll get that out there to you. And then we're going to take 3 weeks off, so we're not going to do any broadcasts like this, at least during the last 2 weeks of December and the first week of January. So we'll be back on January 10th will be our next show. And in the interim, I just wanted to tell you, we are going to be having a really cool thing coming up here on the 13th, doing a collaboration with a blogger out of Reno named Molly Lagoy. She is the Hungry Dater. Yeah, she's single, and yes, she dates, and she's an expert on it, I guess. At least she does some really good, cool things with her blog. But we're doing a 12 days of Christmas cocktails, and that's going to start on the 13th. And you'll be able to follow it and get a different cocktail every day. And it's gonna be really cool. I think you guys are gonna like it, and it's gonna be kind of paired with Christmas songs, so you'll get all of that kind of stuff. The last thing I'm gonna ask you again, if you enjoy the show and you enjoy kind of what we do here, is to please follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook and share. That's really the most important thing, is to share this experience with people out there who you think might like talking to me about what we do here, about the wines. As you can see in front of me, there's all kinds of stuff. I know we had a question about the wolf. You guys, I think the wolf is going to have to be a whole nother show, because the wolf is something that's close to my heart and important, but we'll talk about the wolf another time. Because we are out of time right now, and I've really enjoyed this. Again, if you guys have questions or comments, go ahead and put them in the comments section, and I will make sure I get back to you guys and answer them. But I appreciate you tuning in tonight and kind of indulging me as I talked a little bit about my childhood and kind of my adult little hood before we moved up here to Northern California. And I was able to tell you a little bit about my background. So I thank you for that. I can't wait to tune in again next week with you. So until then, I think I'm going to sign off and give you guys a toast with this tequila, because tequila is always a great fallback. So until then, you guys, cheers. Thank you for joining me tonight. Again, this is Russ from Kilt Cork. Have a good night.